Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50. Today's topic, or today's rant, probably more accurately, is from Michael.
So I just wanted the listeners just to take this statement in and just digest it for a moment. So there'll be a moment of silence after this. So when you retire, just picture whatever date that is, when you retire, in the first 3 years of your retirement, you'll spend $250,000. So it's a phenomenal amount of money when you think of it in those terms. Mm. So let's just say you've been retired for 3 years now. So we're recording this September 2021, which means you retired in around mid-2018 to September 2018.
So you worked through until July so that you could get your leave payout in the next financial year under the advisement of your brilliant financial planner from Money Over 50. But you've retired in July, August 3 years ago. So what's that, 20?
So you can think, everyone, I mean, it may seem like a long time because we've had, the pandemic in between that period of time. But if you actually think back, if someone played you a song from mid-2018 right now, most people would think that was only released a year ago. Yes, people are amazed at how quickly time flies.
Even people like us that are fairly musically challenged would probably know the song, would probably be able to,
It's a good time right now in September of the year to be talking about this, because what most people say about 2021 is, geez, I can't believe we're in September already. So we're in September already. So what I actually just want to, I want everyone just to let it sink in that 3 years, of course, is such a short period of time.
Yeah. And
generally speaking, it represents about 1/10 of someone's retirement.
Yeah.
The time that they spend in retirement.
A couple will spend on average 30 years in retirement. Yep. So the first 3 years is only 1/10. It's 10% of the time that they will have to be retired and fund their retirement.
So what I find amazingly at odds with what I know, and what I know when I say you will spend $250,000 in the first 3 years of your retirement, that just comes from my average client.
Yep.
And I know that my average clients spend somewhere between $70,000 to $80,000 a year once they've retired.
Yeah.
So, if it's $70,000 a year in the first 3 years of their retirement, it's $210,000. Obviously, if it's $80,000 a year, they're up at $240,000. But I also know that they do a lot of other things as well.
They buy a new car.
So they buy a new car usually.
They go on a big trip that they've been putting off.
They go on a trip.
Yeah.
They go, which is fantastic. All of that's fantastic.
Yes.
So we're not saying don't do that.
Yeah. The lesson here is not that you shouldn't spend $250,000. It's that you will. You will.
It's that you will.
Yeah.
It's that you will. So if it's not $250,000, it's a fifth of $1 million or something like that. So it's a considerable amount of money. It's 3 years is a short period of time.
Yeah,
$250,000 is a big sum of money. I mean, we all grew up when $1 million was a massive amount of money. So I think everyone listening, including myself, you've sort of set $1 million to be a huge amount of money, and it's still a considerable amount of money. I'm not belittling that amount of money at all. What my rant's about is that for some reason there's this common misconception that the closer one gets to retirement, the more they should be invested in term deposits and bonds and things like that.
Yeah,
and it's just not practical. It's just not practical for people. So, if we're looking at the term deposit rates now, they're under 1%. Bond rates are around the same amount. There's just this common misconception, and it seems to be everywhere, that the closer I get to retirement, the more I need to move out of the things that grow for me, which are the great companies of Australia and the world, and into these things that are not going to go up and down as much. But the problem with that is that they actually don't go up at all.
No.
And again, that's a staggering amount. It's $250,000 that you're going to spend on average in the first 3 years of your retirement.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not
growing your money,
if your money isn't getting dressed and going to work for you, and actually doing,
you're in big trouble.
A full-time shift, you're in big trouble.
You're going. Well, I guess if you think of it again in that visual sense, if you've got a silo with, so we would say someone who wants to spend between 70 and 80 grand a year in today's dollars, which we would say they probably need about $1.5 million in retirement savings. So you imagine you've got a silo of grain with $1.5 million worth of grain in there. Now, if that's not growing, if that's just a silo with grain in it, and in the first 3 years, so you get $1.5 million. In the first 3 years, you go and scoop out $250,000 and you eat that. So you've eaten,
which is 1/6 of that amount.
Yeah, yep. So you've eaten 1/6 of your grain, and you're 1/10 of the way through your retirement. And this is where the analogy probably gets a bit tortured: is that your appetite goes up every year because everything gets that bit more expensive with inflation. So. Not only have you chewed into your silo a substantial amount. You think of the visual of you've got a huge silo filled with grain. You think it'll last forever, and you've chewed through 1/6 of it in the first 3 years, and then every year the amount that you actually need to scoop out and eat of that grain every year is going up. So, another 3 years later, not only would you not have. You would have taken out another 6. You would have taken a bit more than another 6. So you'd be down below your $1 million threshold. So you thought when you started out you had $1.5 million. You thought I'm going to spend $250,000 in the first 3 years, a bit better the next 3 years. I'm already below that $1 million mark. I'm already less than a millionaire, and I'm only 6 years into my 30-year retirement. So those visuals just don't stack up. You know what I mean? You're going. I've got 30 years to go. I've got this timeline of 30 years, and 1/10 of the way through, I've already chewed through 1/6 of it. There's no other way to approach it than to realise that
if that was represented to you in a bar chart, then you could quite clearly see, this doesn't stack up.
This doesn't stack up. Like I'm going to run out if I do this, even not allowing for inflation. I'm going to run out of this. I'm going to run out of this money before I run out of life. That's just fact. I'm gonna outlive my money, and that's kind of what so your only options at that point in time, and this is I think where you're going to is you can either then go and you can try and build up $4 million in retirement savings, and you go right. Well, I'm not going to get a return on that money, but I've got $4 million, so it doesn't matter that I've taken $250,000 out in the first 3 years because I've still got $3.75 million, and I'm going to chew through it, but. It's okay, but because I've still got enough to get through the next 30 years. And I haven't even done the numbers, and it might not be the case, but it's pretty close to it.
It is, yeah.
But for most people, if you go, okay, well, you're 55 now, you've got $600,000 or $700,000 in super, or you've got $500,000 in super, or whatever you've got, you're not going to have the chance to get $4 million. So that's off the table.
Practically for... not even the average person, practically for the average listener, which the average listener is generally above average in terms of what your superannuation balance is. Practically for the average listener or our average client, most of them aren't going to get anywhere near $4 million. In fact, I mean, $2 million is a great outcome. And so
if you're thinking of that 10 years before retirement, those are your only two options. My two options are get to my $1.5 million mark and make sure that I've got that money working hard for me and growing and continuing to compound over time so that I can be spending primarily the earnings on that money, or I get from where I am now to $4 million. If you've got a pathway to get from where you are now to $4 million, then you don't have to worry about this at all. You can just sit your money in cash and forget about it. But as you say, there are very few people out there who are on track to be at $4 million at retirement, and given that, there's really only one pathway open to you, which is accept the fact that in retirement, you are going to have the vast majority of your retirement savings invested in more volatile, higher returning assets rather than in bonds, term deposits, cash.
Absolutely, and this follows on from the recent podcast episode that we talked about. Are you in a life cycle strategy such as Q Super's lifetime, where as you progress in age and hit these age milestones, like turning 58, for example, is one with Q Super, they'll move you into lower returning, lower volatile investment strategies. Now, here's the ludicrous part about all of this. There's just this blanket statement that I hear from people, and it's I guess strengthened by the superannuation industry in general, in particular the industry funds, and what it is the closer I get to retirement, I shouldn't be in. People will say a certain word. They'll say the closer I get to retirement, I shouldn't be in any high risk.
I should be in safe.
I should be in safe, secure investments. Now, look, everyone wants that.
Yes,
everyone wants that. The reality is, though, it's
not feasible.
It's just not feasible. No. So, number one, people are actually using the wrong terminology, not once but twice. So they're saying, we shouldn't be in high risk now. Now, we agree. You should not be in high risk.
But to me, it's one of those. It's actually a good point because it's not risky to have $1.5 million and spend $250,000 in the first 3 years of retirement and get no return. It's not risky. We guarantee you will run out of money. There's no risk there. You are definitely going to run out of money.
Definitely run out of money.
Risk. We know what's going to happen. So I guess you could put it that way: as you go, there's no risk. There's no range of possible outcomes. You are definitely going to run out of money before you pass away. That's going to happen. As long as you live an average lifespan. So there's no risk. I guess that is correct, but the outcome is very poor.
Yeah. So you're spot on, Dale. So it's. I mean, risk is not a one-dimensional thing. So people think naturally. People that make those statements naturally believe that what they don't want or what is risky is their balance going up and down on any given day. I think what we know is completely risky is that they'll run out of money too early. That's the bigger risk for us in what we see.
And the good point that you made there before, Michael, is that this is not a knock. Like the average person who's listening to this is probably thinking the same thing, and this isn't to say there's just no way that you'd know this. You know what I mean?
No.
And so the media perception or the and even like a lot of fund managers or industry funds or any super funds are not helping with the education of what these possible risks are in future. And so the average person probably hasn't really thought too much about this, and it's not their fault for thinking I should be in more safe assets as I get to retirement. I shouldn't have any money invested in shares. They're just responding to what they have been told over many, many years of their life. So it's not, you're not sort of expected to know this, but I think that's the point that you're making. If you've listened to this podcast, you've now been warned. You are going to spend $250,000 in the first 3 years of your retirement, unless you've got $4 million in retirement savings. If you've got anywhere in the ballpark of $1.5 million, which is what I think the average person will have, if you spend $250,000 and you don't have your $1.5 million invested in a way that can grow over the long term, you are going to run out of money. So regardless of what you've seen on the ads with the industry funds doing the thing that I'm doing here on my chest, which is like the Australian map, or regardless of what you've heard from your next door neighbour talking about, we've just retired, so we moved all our money out of risky assets and, we've put it in term deposits. And regardless of what you've heard from your parents' generation about, risky, investing in shares is risky or investing in something else is risky and, cash is king and all that sort of thing. You've heard all that, and because of that, I understand that that's how most people approach this decision at retirement. But you've now been warned. This is just not. It's not feasible. It's not something that the average person can do. They cannot have their money invested in a way that doesn't get them a significant return and still afford to draw out $250,000 the first year, 3 years of retirement, and not run out of money.
Yeah, look, and why I have gone on a rant, and this is
and now I've started ranting.
You've started ranting, yeah. It's just one of those things that I feel completely strongly and passionately about. And to me, this is one of these things that it's just ludicrous. Like some of the statements that are actually taken as fact.
Yeah.
From
and that's the problem. It's from not so much people, but it's from organisations that should know better. You know what I mean? It's like if you hear that from your next door neighbour, who you kind of go, right, well, take that with a grain of salt. But when QSuper's saying, hey, yeah, you should be moving into these safe assets and other risky assets, you're within your rights to go, well, geez, it's QSuper. They must know what they're talking about here. Yep. And they just don't. It's just incorrect.
It's just so far off the mark. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely ludicrous because we know what people spend, and these aren't high spending people.
No, well, exactly.
This is where
average.
This is table stakes.
Yeah.
So think also about if you're still working now, think about what you and your spouse are bringing in.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, most people would be spending over $70,000 of after-tax dollars every year. So we're not talking about absolute caviar and champagne lifestyles here.
No,
we're talking about average people. We're talking about average people living a reasonable, comfortable lifestyle on $70,000 to $80,000 per year. Net of tax. Now, there's also those things like we mentioned, and these are the common things that we see with almost everyone as they enter retirement. They fix the house up a little bit, so there's a capital cost. They buy a car and state that this one will see me out, which is ridiculous because they've got another
30 years to go.
30 years to go.
Yeah, they buy a caravan. A caravan's a big one.
Might buy a caravan,
a boat.
These are all these things. So it actually can be more than $250,000 in the first 3 years of your retirement. Yeah. But it's on average we see it's around $250,000. Yes. It's around $250,000 that a new retiree will actually spend over the first 3 years of their retirement. Now, at the same time, you have certain superannuation funds, and you just have this blanket statement that you're retired now, so you shouldn't have the term that people use is high risk. You shouldn't have any. Now, we couldn't agree more. What people don't realise is that volatility and risk are two completely different things. So in March of 2020, when the value of our superannuation, our client superannuation funds fell on average by about 37%, and then recovered and grew to a new high. That's volatility.
Yes.
That's volatility. That is not risk.
No.
People refer to that as risk. So risk is the chance that my assets fall 37% and never ever come back.
So what we would agree is that you shouldn't take your $1.5 million of retirement savings and go and buy shares in some specky mining company that's got a market cap of about 200 million, and it's either going to 10x or go to zero. So
yes,
I would agree that you shouldn't be high risk if that is
risk. Now that is an example of risk, and without getting too far into the weeds, you can be invested into the great companies of Australia and the world, and I'll argue with anyone that that's risky. It's volatile. It's highly volatile at times. The global financial crisis saw those valuations fall temporarily by 57%. That panics people. Absolutely. You got $1.5 million. All of a sudden you've got under $700,000. So temporarily. That's an example of volatility. Diversified enough, then you take risk largely off the table. Risk is the chance of permanent loss. Again, it's a two-dimensional thing though. People only ever make that statement one-dimensionally. They say I shouldn't be in higher risk. Okay, well, let's define risk.
Yeah.
I've retired with $1 million, and I'm going to spend a quarter of that.
Yeah, in the first
3 years of my retirement, and I'm only going to get a 1% rate of return. My money is not really even getting dressed to go to work for me.
It's not getting out of bed.
It's working from the couch part time, casually. Yeah, I say that saying all the time, but again, just picture you've stopped work. The day that you stop work, you've got this pool of money, whatever that is, on that particular day. That is now going to work for you. That has to get dressed and go to work and earn enough. For you to be able to draw your $250,000. At the very least, our belief is that sum of money, whatever that is, in the first 3 years of your retirement, has to get dressed and go to work to earn at least $250,000. Because if it doesn't, if it only earns $50,000 or $100,000, you're going backwards straight away, and it's a really, really slippery slope.
Well, I mean, again, I feel like I've tortured a lot of analogies here, but
I've driven this in like a tomato steak. So.
The getting dressed going to work thing is if you're getting up and going to work now, and that's what's putting food in the fridge, and so. Think of your money as a lazy teenager that's just on the couch the whole time and playing Xbox or something like that. So you're getting dressed and going to work, and you're putting food in the fridge, and you're all eating. Everyone's eating the food out of the fridge. Now you stop going to work. It doesn't really matter how much food you've stockpiled. If no one gets dressed and goes to work and puts food back in the fridge, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you went, all right, I'll fill the cupboard with heaps of tin food. You are not going to have enough to get through the next 30 years. It's almost, unless you're one of these doomsday preppers that's genuinely got 30 years worth of tin food, someone needs to get dressed and go to work. Someone needs to put food in the fridge for the household. And as you say, Michael, it's got to be your money. That's the whole point of retirement. So the only other thing that I'd add to this as a separate thing is, I think this is where it's dangerous. The other danger that I see is people who are 55 and they are on track for around $1 million in retirement savings, and they don't necessarily. That feels like a huge amount of money. Like we said before, $1 million feels like a huge amount of money. However, that $1 million may not be enough for them to retire safely and stay retired. So. It's a hard conversation to say to people, I know you're on track for $1 million, but we really need to bump that up to 1.5 or 1.6 million. And the reason for that is that, you will spend $250,000 in the first 3 years of retirement. So you get to $1 million, even if your money is working really hard for you, you're spending $250,000 in that first 3 years. So, sometimes you're probably putting too much pressure on your money at that point in time. You may well need to boost that up to 1.5 or 1.6 or even 2.
Yeah, look, it's a good point. And that's the figure. $1 million is the figure that we commonly see people stall out if they're going to stall out. And what we mean by that is that they come to us with 500 or 600, and we say, okay, we need to really put a plan together to get you to 1.5, 1.6. If they're going to stall out and drop the ball and retire early and stop putting money into the super. It's around the $1 million mark.
And we've talked about it's because I think people see this stuff and they go, I'm a millionaire. I'm not putting any money in. I'm a millionaire.
It's a subconscious. It's a subconscious. And you fall into the trap. You fall into the trap of saying, okay, the first year of my retirement, I'm going to spend $70,000.
Yes.
It's too narrow of a trap. It's too narrow of a time frame. Think 3 years.
And 3 years is perfect.
3 years is a perfect amount of time. It's quick.
Yeah.
It comes around really, really quickly.
Yep, but
you're going to spend $250,000 just I'm driving this into the ground like a tomato steak. But it's a staggering amount of money.
It is,
and it's the average.
Yes,
we're not talking about people that are flying business class to the Seychelles or anything like that. In this scenario, we're talking about. Our average clients who are fairly conservative people, and they're by no means living the champagne and caviar lifestyle. So that average couple will spend $250,000 in the first 3 years of their retirement. So it's just I'm speaking with a lot of passion in this, and it's just to really hammer it home that you're going to hear a lot, because if you started getting interested in your retirement now, your ears are going to be open to hearing a lot of information, and reading a lot of information.
That's why we're banging this into the ground.
We're banging this in right now because you're going to hear a lot of things over the next 10 years that conflict with what we've said in this podcast. So we can tell you. Actually, I won't say that we're definitely right.
You'll get sued.
We'll get sued. So I'm not saying that we're definitely right. No, but I'm saying that you're going to hear a lot of garbage. And read a lot of garbage. And it'll be from some big institutions as well. And you'll think you might trust these institutions. And again, remember, I mean, the last podcast that we did, we talked about the life cycle strategy. They're trying to cater to a massive audience, of which you, as the listener of this podcast, do not represent the average person. On in that audience. So if they're telling you, once you've turned 58, we're going to move you into this investment strategy. By and large, that's not appropriate for you as a listener of this podcast. Someone who's actually actively taking control of their retirement plans, you're far from average. You're far from average in terms of what that fund is actually trying to cater for.
Well, I mean, I think we've, as you say,
I'm out of rant.
We've really attacked this point enough that if anyone's still listening at this point and going, yes, we get it now. Okay, $250,000 first 3 years, we get it. And that's why your money needs to get dressed and go to work for you. That's the point. I think we've banged on about it enough. So I think we can wrap it up there.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.